San Juans and other places in Colorado. And at one point I was panning gold. I was working some crevices and pockets through there. And I just happened to look up. And when I looked up, there was a creature standing not too far, but on the other side of the creek from where I was. And, I was of course, scared, a little scared and surprised. But I continued to pan, like, I wasn't, startled by it or anything. I didn't know what its intentions was, but what happened was it stood there and watched me, and I watched the sun as it went down, and I believe that it probably stood there and watched me sway back and forth for almost 2 hours. And I stayed in the same hole. I didn't realize it until after it was over with, but I stayed in the same hole, panning. And the whole time I was panning, I was saying the Lord's Prayer out loud, and I would tell it stories. I would, just talk to myself. I even sang some songs. And I happened to look up after what I figured was about 2 hours, and he was gone without a sound, nothing. And I suppose he got what he wanted from me. I don't know, but I talked to him the whole time, and like I said the Lord's Prayer probably about 50 or 60 times out loud. But that was it was pretty scary at that time. But I was way up in the middle of nowhere. And if anything had happened to me, nobody was going to find me. And I was afraid to leave because I didn't know what its intentions was. I didn't know if it was going to, come get me, or what was going to happen, or if it would just let me leave. But also, my brother and I, back up in the early '80s, we had found 3 of them. And they were a family group, a male, a female, and then a small one, probably about our size, but I figured it to be probably a young teenager or a preteen, something like that. But they did not seem to care too much about us. This is in a very remote area, which is now built up. It's all subdivisions, which is very sad in Texas. And we would follow them, and they didn't seem to care as long as we didn't follow too close to them. And eventually, down the road, about 10 miles, where they would come into this swamp area, they were opening a subdivision, and I bought land by the swamp because I knew that's where they went, because we had tracked them so often. And, it was pretty cheap because it was by the swamp. But when I started making a house there, I figured if I was going to, keep an eye on them and try to get pictures and things of that sort, that I would stay in this area. What happened was, one night, because we worked at night, we were working on the house, and we smelled the smell of rotten type potatoes. It's rotten potato smell, musty smell. And my brother and I, we both looked at each other and kind of smiled because we knew what it was. My brother had been an old logger up in Utah, and up in Washington and Oregon. And so he was familiar with them. Also, I had my first sighting at the age of 16. But anyway, as the days passed and the months went by, people moved into the front side of the subdivision. Not too many, but a few. And everybody had dogs. And so when they would come through, they would go right down past my property lines. And they would make all kinds of noise, barking at the dogs. The dogs would bark at them, and they would bark back. And it seemed like they were enjoying the play or whatever. But and of course, some people did lose animals out there, dogs and cats and everything. But they would get up to my property line, and they would be real quiet. you could hear them. They didn't mind making noise with, breaking, branches, stomping the ground as they go through. But once they got past my property line, they were smart enough to know, that was my area, my territory, and, they will let me have that much. So, then they would start up again, and they would bark at the dogs, and they would just keep on going. And, it was a real experience. And also, while we would, be out there tracking them, they would actually, or one of them would actually go across in front of us. He'd just mosey by like, I don't care if y'all see me. And they would walk those lonely roads back there at night. There was nobody back in there. And you could see the sign that they left and things of that sort. But they got to where, I don't know what we did, but we were sitting out on the road one night after doing a lot of work. And I guess they decided just to check and see if we were going to, run, if we scared easy. And my brother, he was crazy the whole time. Anyway, he told me, he said, if one runs out and gets me and takes off with me, he said, don't come look for me, I'm just going to live with them. I said, okay, David. But they came up not far from where we were, about, within 35 yards probably, right at the edge of the darkness. And, we didn't use, we had all the lights off because, we turned the generator off and all our lights and everything off. And they went to screaming and hollering at us. It was just deafening, and you could feel it going through, your whole body. And they beat their chests, and they stomped their feet, and they articulated somehow that we didn't understand. And then out comes this big log, piece of pine tree log, and it rolls out and comes right up towards us. So we take that log. My brother says, "Come on, brother," and we grab the log and we throw it back back into the darkness. And we heard this, it was like a big grunt. And then everything got real quiet, and we heard them moving off. And my brother was dancing back and forth, and he said, "We won, little brother, we won." And I said, "What do you mean we won? You're going to get us killed?" And he said, "No." He said, they weren't mad. They were just testing us." But my brother, he was a colorful character. He's passed away now, but he was quite a colorful character, and he loved the outdoors, and he spent a lot of time, out looking for them. But that's about it.
Except for what? Your county was close as mine.
But you don't want me to tell?
No, don't tell.
Okay. When I was 16, we lived in a very remote area in Texas. And we lived pretty close off the land, everything. We hunted and we fished and we grew all our own, vegetables and all our, we had our own chickens, we had our own goats and, a calf now and then and things like that. And, that's how we lived. It was my turn to go hunting. I was 16, and so I went. There's a power line right away that I always hunted on, because when they cleaned the power line, they left all these logs, and I would climb up in these logs, and that's where I would hunt from. And I had crossed a big barbed wire fence, and I was walking down, and I realized that something was walking behind me. And I kept looking back, and I kept looking to the sides of me, and I could hear something go across behind me on the power line. Well, I would watch on that side, and then finally I started catching this black bipedal type creature that was, paralleling my footsteps. but he was in the trees, and he would slide between the trees. Well, when I got up to where the logs were, and sat down, and I busted my knee trying to get up there as fast as I could, and I said things my grandma would have hollered at me about. But anyway, he would go behind me. It would go behind me, and I would turn this way to try to see it, and then it would come back in front of me while I'm looking this way, and it was kind of like a game. I decided that I would just skedaddle back out of there, and I'd go home and tell my dad, there wasn't anything out there in the woods right now. But anyway, I got down. It continued to follow me, and as I got to the barbed wire fence that I had to go over, there was some oak trees here, and the limbs came down like this, almost to the ground. And it was standing in there. I could see it, pretty well. And I would move forwards. It would back up. I would back up. It would move forwards. And it really wasn't, but maybe a half a foot taller than me. And I was 6 foot then, even then. But when we did this for a little while, I decided that there's this big pine tree right here, and right by the fence, and I can go around that pine tree and I can look down that little corridor, that the limbs make, and I can look and see him perfectly, or see it perfectly. Well, as soon as I stepped around that pine tree, well, he stepped around the pine tree too, on the other side. And we were just standing there, and we were so close to each other that I could have reached out, and touched his chest. And he stood there and just, looked at me, like, here I am, And I didn't know what to think. I didn't really try to talk to it too much or anything because I was scared to death. I was 16. It was the first time I'd ever, seen anything like this. And so what happened was we stared at each other for a little while. And I kind of backed off, and he came a little forward, so I put my gun up. Because I didn't know, if he was going to, try to make me stay there, or what he would, what his intentions were. I'd never seen anything like this. It was a monster to me. And so, it stopped. And when it stopped, I turned and I went through that barbed wire fence, and I'll tell you, I left shirt and some pants on that fence. But it was, it's totally amazing because that was my very first, sighting that I ever had, and it pretty much changed my life. I grew up in a Scottish household, and most of my family, still told all the old stories and everything. My grandparents lived with us, and I was thinking of ogres and banshees, and I was thinking about the gray man, which is Scotland's answer to the Bigfoot here. And, a lot of people say it's the gray man's a ghost, but I had a lot of things on my mind as I was running to my truck as fast as I could go. And my dad's old truck, I didn't know could get so much, or leave so much rubber on the road, or do a turnaround so fast. But that's where I discovered what he's talking about. And, I
It's
saw
actually very quite interesting because this is the first gentleman that actually told me something about what I saw. And, first of all, tell him what group you're with, Texas.
the Texas Big Thicket Watch. That's who we are. We've been out there for about 15 years. And my son, Brandon, he is with, tell him who you're with.
Texas Unified Natural Research.
Texas Unified Natural Research. And so, we're kind of, he has his own team, I have my team, and we consist of a communication specialist all the way down to biologist. So, we have a kind of diversity of people that go out with us. But anyway, that's who we are.
You're hired. You're welcome. Thank you. Now, like I said, this is the first gentleman of all the people I've talked to that had sightings that told me something I saw or seen that nobody else had ever told me.
Down dry.
Either they weren't close enough or they didn't notice it. And I was totally amazed when we were talking because when he said it, I'm like, I've been waiting for that since 1997. So it confirms that these creatures are the same in California as they are in Texas. They are the same they are in British Columbia as they are in Tennessee. Maybe longer hair, different color, different screams, I don't know. I think they're all in the same category. And what he told me, from Texas to California, they're the same. So, you know, that's a big jump for me today. That was totally amazing. It blew me away, actually. And also his closest encounter, like I had, he's the second person, third person, that had a close encounter as close as I had. Very few I've talked to. There is an encounter in the Canadian border on Washington. The Washington, American Border Patrol on the Canadian-Washington border. I was telling you about these sensors when they go off on the border. Well, they have the same thing in Canada. When they have the sensor go off, they run to that sensor day or night. And one of the gentlemen actually is going to join our project, the Falcon Project, because he loves our idea. He's seen the creatures many a time on the Canadian border in the last 25 years. Well, his partner had to run down the trail to catch if it was a person crossing the border. He goes around a big tree, the trail does, and he runs smack into one of these creatures. He went to the ground. This creature took off. He got up and ran the other way. Scared the living blank out of him. And he actually hit it, ran right into it. And to me, I think these creatures are very docile. I don't think, just like his encounter, it didn't do anything to him. I've heard of miners, one story where he had a pick in his hand. He was picking at this quartz vein. This thing came up behind him. He, had the pickaxe up. The creature did nothing to him. He ended up walking away. I don't think they're great. I mean, when it comes to eating animals and stuff, I guess, they get hungry just like we do. If you got food here, what a great way to get food. Sorry they have to do that, but it happens. But sightings happen all the time, all across the country. I just found out from Sally, Standing Stone Park. I'm from Overton County, Tennessee. She told me that they've been researching this park for 20 years. I lived on 400 acres below the park about 20 years ago. The only thing I ever seen there was maybe a black cat that crossed the field twice, which in a year's time I've seen twice. And she's telling me they found tracks in there. There's 3 groups there. I can't disagree with her, but I know that area very well. I've hiked that area. I'm from there. I've hunted ginseng all through there. And it totally amazes me that they are in this area. In fact, I had an email before I came here about 5 days ago from Cookeville, Tennessee, 27 miles from Livingston, where I'm from, that they've been having sightings in Overton County, Tennessee. And I used to sleep on the ground. Just throw my sleeping bag on the ground, just lay on my sleeping bag at nighttime hunting ginseng. I would never do it again. There's no way. I wouldn't take a tent out by myself and hike out in the middle of nowhere by myself anymore. Unless my gun was like a 50 caliber or whatever. It does bother me. Like I said, I don't think they're harmful, but then again, it's kind of scary. Like he said, or somebody said earlier, creatures. We call them creatures. And when we see pictures of them, they got claws on them, they got fangs, and I think it's a wrong deception on these creatures. I think we should treat them more as a animal. I mean, not an animal, not a person, but I don't think they could to describe them as monsters. That's the point I'm trying to make. They're not monsters. They're creatures that are trying to survive just like you and me, but we have it better than they do. Well, they probably have it better than we do. We got to pay taxes, they don't. But,
So true.
and they don't have to drive cars or put gas in cars. They don't have to cook their food, I guess. Oh, there is a question.